Okay, thank you both for being here with me today. So we are talking about fidelity. So Triple P, along with FPG, have created these brand new tools, learning modules, and resources to help Triple P practitioners and communities look at fidelity. So my first question for you all is, how does Triple P define fidelity?
All right, Sarah, over to you.
I will jump in to say we've had lots of conversations about what fidelity means and how you look at fidelity. So I think we can think about it in multidimensional terms. But in short, Triple P views it as the delivery of Triple P in a way that will achieve the same outcomes that were found in the research. So sticking to the core components and the core content of the program in order to achieve the outcomes. With that, there's always the need for tailorability, so we also, I think, would define it as flexibility and fidelity. So the idea that those two concepts come together. Courtney, would you add?
Well, I just think that's the emphasis, right? That we really see them as going like hand in hand, that if the model is going to be relevant, so we do want to achieve the same outcomes that we see in the research, but we also, it needs to feel relevant to the families that we're working with, right? And in the context that we're doing this work. So to really have folks get confident in knowing the program well enough to trust themselves to know when we need to be flexible and when it makes sense and when it's like a high risk situation for making an adaptation or when it might be a lower risk. So we really try to provide guidance around all of that.
Great. And to that question, for a Triple P community that's implementing, what are some of the things that they should be measuring or think about measuring when you think about fidelity?
Fun. Up until very recently, our primary measurement tools were our session checklist, which covered the content of what should be delivered in each session, backed by the manuals that practitioners get at training, which gives some concrete examples and those kinds of things. But we have just in the last month released our next addition to Fidelity Tools, which is the result of a 4-year process of systematically reviewing the program and doing different stakeholder groups and pilot testing with 7 core components. So as we looked at the content checklist, we just all kind of felt like and got feedback from the field. We were missing some things. We were missing some of our process elements of how you deliver Triple P. So that led to this 4-year, detailed process that has resulted in 7 core components for the delivery of Triple P, which now we also have some strengths checklist for practitioners or agencies to be able to look at whether themselves as a practitioner or their practitioners within the agency are using these 7 components, using them, delivering them with quality, and then it being in a context or an organizational environment that supports fidelity.
Anything from you, Courtney?
I think that covers it. We can certainly talk in a little more detail. I'm guessing maybe some of your next questions will dive us a little bit deeper into exploring some of that.
Yeah, so the next question I was going to ask, so yay, new tools and resources coming out. So you talked about kind of the process a bit of how these were developed, but can you talk a little bit more to how these were developed and how you see them helping communities to measure fidelity moving forward? So yeah, what did that look like, the process of developing them and how you see them helping?
Absolutely. Courtney, I was going to start with just the NER modules and then turn it over to you for the measurement. So when we started this 4-year process, we had a work group working on fidelity, and we are an experienced group and have a lot of experience to draw on, but we wanted a scientific base to come back to for the development. So we went to NERN's Active Implementation Hub and completed the modules there on building fidelity assessments, which led to the creation of what we call the monster. It was this really huge Excel file that took all 7 domains and broke them down by each specific intervention and within context and competence and context. And then found out that wasn't really usable. So we did some pilot testing with some of our actual sites implementing to find out like what resonates, what doesn't resonate, what do you need? And so that's 4 years compressed into like 5 sentences there. But I want to turn it over to Courtney because I haven't let you talk. So I'll let you tell how we got to like the final product of where we are.
Yeah, I mean, just, definitely iterative process with lots of feedback from some of our good partners and asking them to just take a look at what we were developing and what we were thinking about. I guess, and just add that obviously we included our model developer in looking at, some of this work and thinking a little bit like, have we really distilled down what the essence of what's triple P, like what's the secret sauce? Like if you're doing these things, you're doing triple P. If you're not doing these things, it's really not triple P. And then figuring out like a usable format for that. So I'm so sorry, I need to get some water. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay. So really just a ton of feedback. It was so important to get from our partners, right? And to really try to come up with something that was usable. And we had our ideas about what was usable. We knew the monster spreadsheet was not usable. But even like our next go at what we thought might be helpful, got the feedback like, yeah, not so much. And so it was great to have that kind of collaboration to help inform this. And what we really ended up with was feeling like we need to first define what each of these 7 core components are, and really help people kind of think about them. And taking again from NERN, like let's look at the content. So what in our manuals tells us how to attend to this certain core component, and then how does it look to do it well? It's one thing to be able to read your manual and understand it and kind of convey some of those concepts, but is there that relationship with you and the family where it seems relevant, they're really kind of picking it up and you're going at a pace that works for them? And again, just making it really relevant is so key. So the knowing how to do it, the art of doing it well, but then also the context in which we do our services, right? So what as an organization or an agency can we be attending to that supports, that these core components are actually, being like attended to and supported and considered. So we came up with info sheets on each of the core components, and we could just list those really quickly, I guess. What we identified is the 7 different areas. The first one is really thinking about assessment. And we really agreed that even in a seminar, Sarah's shaking her head no. Did you want to start with Alliance?
No, sorry, Evie was coming into the picture. So I was
like, are you telling me I can't start with assessment?
No, go for it.
I'm not going in alphabetical order.
Okay, so just to ground us again. So now you're going through what the actual resources and
right.
tools are. Okay, right. So the info sheets, go. Okay.
Yeah, so we've got our info sheets and across the 7 different core components. And the first core component is really around assessment. And we just took a look across, again, all the different interventions and the different variants of the model. And even if you're conducting one of the lighter touch, like what we call a level 2 seminar, there's still an assessment process going on as parents are asking questions and you're responding to those and you're understanding if people are really getting the content, if it feels like it's relevant, how best to promote like kind of their learning in that seminar situation. And then of course, certainly all the way up through the more intensive interventions, assessment is just really key to having a good understanding of what's the concern or the questions that the parent I'm working with or the parents I'm working with have, and how do we really make Triple P feel relevant, in response to that. So being able to do a thorough assessment at whatever level of intervention is really key to the model. And again, then thinking about content, what in the manual helps us think about assessment, what resources are there, and then competence, how good am I at doing the assessment? Do I get the information that's helpful? Do parents really feel included in that process? And then making meaning of those assessment findings as relevant to the level of intervention. And then again, what can organizations be doing to support folks as they think about the assessment process? How is that being supported? What resources are there and in place? How is information collected and shared? All of that good stuff, right? And then alliance is just equally important. All of these we think are really critical, but alliance is really, don't pass go without it. You're not going to be able to engage in meaningful services with parents or caregivers if you don't feel like you've got a good relationship and rapport that's being built that feels collaborative. And so again, like what in the content of the manual helps with this, things like agenda setting, explaining the rationale, really helping to predict for parents, if you participate in this, here's what you can expect as the outcomes, really getting that kind of buy-in. And then also just taking into account what is the context this family is, living in and their parenting world, and what does it look like for them day in, day out to be parenting their kids, and what are their concerns, and how do we make sure we're being really reflective and being inclusive in how we think about things, and building relationships with folks that have different lived experience maybe than we do. So really, like what needs to happen to make our ability to have good alliances with all the families we're working with, be stronger. So that's really key there. And then we talk about, homework. If we're only with parents for so long, and so if they're not really having opportunities to practice what we're working on or content that we've shared with them and strategies we've introduced, then it's probably not going to be likely that they're going to affect very much meaningful positive change. So we really look at co-creating homework, again, that feels really relevant for parents, and that's pretty essential to Triple P and what it's about. How we teach the parenting strategies, same thing, really making sure that we're providing examples that make a lot of sense with, do we have a parent of a 4-year-old, a 7-year-old? Do they live, in a community where there's a local park? Are they more in an urban setting where, we're taking public transport to get places? Just really kind of know, like, again, what does it look like in terms of how you're parenting to teach these strategies that are going to feel relevant for you? Really knowing that, really understanding that. And then we look at, also, self-regulation is like bread and butter to Triple P. So we're not in there to tell parents how to parent. We're not in there to tell them the right or wrong way to parent. We're there to understand what their goals for parenting are, what their goals for the relationship with their kids are, and then helping to really give them more confidence in navigating these daily ins and outs of parenting. So, we do that through promoting self-regulation, getting parents to be more thoughtful about what are my intentions in my relationship with my kiddos? What do I want to see that might look different, whether it's reducing things or increasing things, but really getting parents to feel like, I can do this, I got this, like, I got some ideas. And then we're really just there to help coach and facilitate that. But again, we're not prescribing to parents any of these strategies. They really have to decide for themselves what feels useful. So, really thinking about promoting self-regulation is really, really key to the model. And then 2 others that aren't necessarily, around maybe kind of the art of delivery, but are identified as really important to Triple P. And that is 1, looking at program outcomes. So how are we collecting data? How are we using data? What are our processes around that? And making sure practitioners are just clear about, the processes for that, why it's valuable, why we think it's important. And then our training protocols. So that's really on us, but we think that's really key to Fidelity and Triple P, is how we go about training practitioners to be able to deliver the model and to get the accreditation process. So really making sure that we stick to our Fidelity when it comes to how that process is managed, and that folks have gone through that in a consistent way. It gives us some assurance that folks are more likely to practice with Fidelity. So those are really the core components. So we created info sheets that really describe each of those and break it down again by content and competence and context, and give examples of what that might look like, and some ideas for some data indicators, like, just kind of thinking about that a little bit. And then what resources are available that they might want to look at. So you'll see some reference to going back to the practitioner provider network website for Triple P that practitioners have access to, whether it's good, video vlogs and Q&A with Matt on different topics, and, things you can download there. So directing people back to some of those. We've got different articles that we reference on some of this content. So just, making that available. But then from there, it was a long process to get to that. But then it was actually a pretty quick process at that point to say, all right, we've got this kind of figured out. We've identified what these elements are. We know what they look like. We think we know what they look like. Let's make checklists. We love our checklists. So what we did is we really just took each of those 7 areas, those core components, and we made 3 different checklists. So 1 specific to content, then 1 specific to competence, and 1 on context. And the 2 on content and competence are really more like practitioner based, right? Being able to self-evaluate, self-reflect on, how was my proficiency across these core components? How do I do at Alliance? How am I doing with, getting homework completed? What's an area that maybe I identify where I'm beginning or developing or I'm proficient? So being able to kind of rate on each of those things where we might see ourselves. But we anticipate these could also be used for observation, whether it's a peer observing and giving feedback, with a colleague, or whether it's a supervisor or someone that's in a coaching role, being able to use these as just a discussion starter, really, right? And the idea is, again, that parallel process to promoting self-regulation is so key. So we really, whatever we came up with, we knew, the heart of it was to hopefully let practitioners, wherever you are now, like set some goals and get a little better, right? Get a little more confident, get a little more assured that you're delivering Triple P the way it's been developed and intended to be delivered, but in a way that feels, useful to you and like it's really yours. So we're hoping that these checklists that we're, releasing now are really going to help folks just, again, like kind of just wherever they're at, get a little bit better.
Awesome. So I'm going to try to summarize what I just heard. So there are 7 components: 1, assessment; 2, alliance; 3, homework; 4, teaching; 5, self-regulation; 6, program outcomes and data; and 7, training protocols. And
Yeah.
so there are info sheets that detail all of those components with resources and articles attached. And then there are 3 checklists that go into those components that talk to content, competence, and context.
Yep, you got it. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So you started talking about this a little bit, and Sara, I'd love to hear your input too. Is when you developed these, you said you pilot tested them. What were some of the things that came out in those pilot tests that maybe people implementing these tools might want to know or keep in mind?
Yeah. So I think we've kind of done 2 rounds of that. One was with our first attempt, which were intervention specific info sheets. But it was also the first time we introduced these 7 core components. So across both pilots, what came across, kind of loud and clear, which we're really thankful for, is that everybody resonated with those 7 core components as being crucial, essential, parts of Triple P. So not just our stakeholder group agreeing with that, but our folks who are delivering in the field. I should also mention that that most of our pilots were done with sites that had an interest in looking at Fidelity and had some kind of coaching or really strong peer support processes in place. But with this intervention specific ones, they were like, it's too much. Like, this isn't what we needed. We needed, more of the, like, what does self-regulation look like? So that's what turned into more the checklist kind of format, and the idea of kind of the broader glance, across interventions. But what are these big tasks that should look like? So maybe coming to the intent of how these checklists are supposed to be used, because I know we introduced this and then folks are like, 3 more checklists to use. And the idea is no, not 3 more to use at one time, or in addition to content checklist all the time. But our hope and our idea is that folks will take a look at where their practitioners are with Fidelity kind of now. And is it that we just need to make sure that that we're implementing at all these core components? So if you're a brand new program, maybe that's, maybe you want to start with the session checklist. So we're doing the actual program. And then maybe we want to go to, are we doing these 7 elements? Are we just doing them, the content checklist part? And then we can increase, maybe then eventually to are we doing them well? How well are we doing them? And then folks filling out an organizational context checklist would be separate from those, but if you're working where you feel like there could use some improvements on supporting practitioners, then there's areas there. So kind of like in Triple P with parents, where we say, there are all these things you could be working on. What's the thing you want to work on most right now? I think we think that kind of same part about Fidelity, practitioners needing to fill out 3 checklists at the end of every session is crazy, never feasible. But organizations can say, we want to focus on this first, or practitioners have input to say, we'd like to focus on knowing this first. So that's where we kind of are now. We just got these checklists finalized about a month ago. So we're just starting to kind of, release those. And I'll also say that these are I mean, they're final enough to get out there and use, but we do hope we continue to get feedback from sites as they implement these newest checklists. And then we certainly plan to make revisions and updates, as we go along based on the feedback that we get.
Perfect. So you're kind of answering my last question here is, and I'll ask you maybe to give more of an example, is for communities that maybe are starting or have been implementing Triple P for some time now, what are some ways that you would suggest they might get started using these tools?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have lots of different ideas, and we're going to be so curious to get feedback from sites once that you really start to take a look at them and become more familiar with them and hear how people are using it and what ideas they have, so we can really share that. We're going to be doing a webinar to introduce them in early May, so we're looking forward to that, so we can really start to get it more broadly disseminated and start to get more feedback. But I think as Sara was pointing out some of those examples, to just really allow folks to kind of think about where they are in the progression of their Triple P implementation and what makes sense. And I think, this is going to look different at different layers. So you may have a regional, folks kind of thinking about how do we really, where there's good coaching in place, and like, how can we really support our practitioners with using these tools? Do we want to have kind of a minimal requirement for some of this stuff, at the least, try to use these every so often, or just really kind of thinking through how they might be incorporated into whatever structure's in place, really, right? So that's what we're hoping for, is that, just whatever, whether it's the organization level or even just single practitioners that are out there on their own doing Triple P, that they're going to be able to take a look at these and really feel for themselves, like, how would this help my professional development? How, again, would this help us just feel like when we're doing Triple P, we're really, kind of adhering to what's expected and calling it that, and delivering the program. I think the possibilities are kind of endless, but as Sara said, the intent is never to say, do all these at the same time, all the time. It's really to, again, just kind of take a look. And, like Sara was mentioning, I love that just getting started, some folks really need to increase their level of, just being able to know the material, know the content, really focusing on that. And that checklist may be a really great place to start. But you could very well have someone who, really needs to focus more on the competence, like they've got the manual, they're studious, they've like read through it all right after training, they're ready to go. But they're new in the field and they just haven't had a lot of experience building alliance or, really kind of doing the work with direct parents. So we're just hoping that whatever kind of makes sense really for folks and for initiatives, that they'll figure out how these resources might fit in and just be another tool that's available. So again, with this idea of minimal sufficiency, we talk a lot in Triple P, we haven't mentioned it yet, but that was very much guiding our development of these resources, is what can we do that provides, enough support, and then really let, our partners and our agencies that are implementing take it from there and figure out what's useful about this and how they might, fit these into the work.
That's awesome. So I'm hearing you kind of go back to what you were saying earlier around the flexibility and the fidelity go hand in hand. And really, it's about figuring out what works best in your context. Yeah.
Great summary.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, that's all the questions I have for you all. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you just want to make sure that everyone in the Triple P community knows about Fidelity and these tools?
I think just always that we're here as resources. So as you get to looking at them or thinking about them, or you hear this and you're like, okay, this is great, but I have no idea where we should start. Is that we're they're meant to be done, with consultation, with support, and we're happy to help folks think through how they might best use the different tools.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm already hearing some coaching support might be useful for this, figuring out how to add on some additional support after training. So sounds like there's a variety of ways these can be used. So thank you all for your time. And we look forward to hearing more about these in the May rollout of these tools. And these tools will also be attached to the Implementeer newsletter. And if you, again, want to get in touch with us, you have our information. So thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks, Sherra. Thanks for being excited about Fidelity with us.
Of course. All right.
Bye.